Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The doctors are in. A Bit of Light is the story of recovering alcoholic Ella, played by Anna Paquin, who moves back in with her father while her young daughters live with her ex-husband and his wife. She faces heartbreaking challenges, but finds support and hope in Neil, a strange boy she befriends. Screenwriter, playwright, and actor Rebecca Callard adapted the film from her award-winning play of the same name. Rebecca previously wrote for TV on the FX Hulu series Breeders and has several original projects in development. Also with us today is the director of the film, someone most will recognize from his 20-plus years as an actor. Stephen Moyer is best known for playing the role of Bill Compton in True Blood, a big favorite of mine. But he added director to his list of credits while on the show, directing 3 episodes. And he has been producing TV and film for over 10 years now. Rebecca, Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Before we get into A Bit of Light specifically, I just like to ask always, Stephen, we usually talk to the writers mostly, but it's great to have you here as a director and actor because you have a unique perspective. Because as a veteran actor and a director, you have a great amount of understanding and sense of responsibility of what's happening on both sides of the camera. And do you ever feel the need to compartmentalize things when you're working? How do you balance each role?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started directing TV, I was in the show, obviously. Very glad to hear that you were a fan, Tom. I was on that particular show. We were very, very respectful of Alan Ball's words, and then when I started directing, I really started to see what an extraordinary sort of undertaking it was to be under his stewardship, because he brings people in who do what they do. He does not get in their way. He's very respectful of costume, lighting, every single department. And so therefore he doesn't feel the need to sort of micromanage. And it was really great for me that, because when I started directing, I was just so aware of everybody's departments, and also aware that the writer is sitting with you on set, and so you have them as a sort of a foil to bounce off, and occasionally, as happens in these things, you kind of go, "Oh, that does that need a little bit of tweaking, that line?" And they're there to help you with it, So I prefer directing without acting, but I have recently had to do it with Sexy Beast. I'm in a show called Sexy Beast on Paramount Plus, and I was directing and acting in that. But on the whole, I much prefer to just direct, and very much enjoyed having my dear friend of 25 years, Rebecca, right next to me in the chair to always be able to sort of bounce off of in this regard. And we'd sort of listen sometimes and sort of go, do we like that? Do we feel like we need to add anything? But on the whole, I think we kept it pretty much as was, didn't we, Bex?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there were budget limitations for some of the stuff that was in the original play, because obviously with a play, I think you can be broader, because in that kind of space, you can use your imagination more, whereas with screen, not necessarily so. So there were some things that we just couldn't do because we didn't have the budget. But in terms of the emotional presence, I think Stephen and I were very much on the same page. I don't think there was anything that Stevie did that I was feeling like, oh, wow, absolutely not. Please don't do that. Yeah.
Question for Rebecca, because we always like to know how writers got started in the business, and you came from stage into screen, I believe. So just how did you fall into it? What was the inspiration for A Bit of Light? Issues with adapting it, things like that.
I was an actor, and I entered a competition with A Bit of Light that I'd been in a play that was in that competition. It's called the Bruntwood Playwriting Competition. It's the biggest UK playwriting competition in the UK. And I wanted to write a story. I'd been through some significant heartbreak, particularly with my children. My ex-husband and I split, and we started to share our children, and both of us hadn't realised the magnitude of how living without your children half the time was going to affect us. So it was quite heavy in my heart, and I had this idea for the story. And so I thought I'd send it into the Bruntwood, because they give you script notes. And if you get into the top 100, I think there was over 2,000 entrants the year that I entered. It was also anonymous, so you enter under a pseudonym. And I just thought, well, I didn't really have any equipment or anything. So I had an iPad that was broken. I wrote it all as one giant text. Every time I tried to edit any of it, it would change the sort of structure of it. So I just entered it as a first draft, as a basic huge text message, and got into the top 100, then got down to the top 10, and then it won a prize, and I won some money, which was great, because then I could actually buy something to write on. And it won a commendation. So, and we did a reading of it at the National Theatre. And then when that was announced, Stevie got in touch with me and said, "Oh, I'd like to read it." So that is how I started writing. I hadn't written anything before that.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. And congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
such an amazing, like, splashy debut, for your first piece of work. That's amazing.
Yeah. It
Question.
definitely doesn't always happen like that.
Right? Yeah. I mean, talk about the stars aligning. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
There's
I
a
mean,
really
okay.
lovely little tiny story that Bex kept out there, which was
Oh, yeah.
we met on a show called The Grand, which was written by Russell T Davis.
Oh, yeah.
You guys will know Russell from
Doctor
probably
Who.
It's a Sin, Years and Years, Doctor Who. He wrote the original Queer as Folk. He is just extraordinary. He's beloved in the UK. And he had written a show. We actually played opposite each other in that show around 96. And that year, when Bex entered anonymously, Russell was one of the judges. So he had no idea that it was Rebecca's play that he was giving a commendation. So that was a really lovely little sort of
wow. Talk about a full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And I was going to say, I can tell you both are very close. So it sounds like you go way back. And I understand that, Stephen, when you wanted to acquire the rights, they were already taken.
That is correct. Yeah. And it was very strange as well, because when Bex had first sent me the script, I'd sort of, begged her to send it to me, and she sent it to me, and I was actually filming something at the time. So I'd put it to the side, and by the time I got to it, which was I think it was 4 or 5 weeks later, and I came back and I went, "Oh my God, I want to do this." She was like, "Dude, I've just signed with somebody else who really likes it and wants to do it." And I was like, "No." It's one of those things where my first film was tonally not dissimilar, just in terms of, I always make this sort of slight joke that I want my films to be about something. And that usually means that there's not going to be any money and very, very low budget. And the first film was about suicide but a family coming together because of the suicide. And when I read the play, I was very sort of taken by this idea of this person in a very low spot in her life who gets seen by, as it turns out, this 13-year-old boy, and everybody else sort of ignores her. She goes unnoticed, apart from by this, as I think you said, slightly odd young boy who sort of takes it upon himself to put her back together. And I just thought it was such a beautiful idea of somebody in that situation being seen, and and but also very similar tonally. I've been sober for 23 years, and so that sort of idea of this woman in this sort of place of sobriety, but in the lowest of lows, being reconstructed by this little boy who sees her.
I
Really
I'm
touched
20
me.
years sober the week that the film comes out, actually. So yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
girl.
congratulations.
Wow.
That's a big
Yeah.
accomplishment. I
Thank
mean, on both fronts, the sobriety
Yeah.
and the when the film debuts. That's
Yeah, me
awesome.
and Bex partied back in the day, didn't we, babe?
Oh man. So when the rights did become available, did you end
Yeah.
up in a bidding war, or how did you, or were you just like, just tell me on the sly and I'll get them? Like,
I,
how did
I
that all
had
work
I
out?
had I had loved the script so much that I had continuously like just checked in with Bex, not even specifically to say to her that, for me to be part of it. I just wanted to help her get it made. And at that time, when I just loved it so much, that at that time when there were other people involved, I was just like, anything you need, anything that you want, any help, anything I can help you with to get this to the place that you need it to get to. I had my own production company, so we had sort of various means of sort of getting it in front of people. I was just trying to help. So
The
then,
rights ran out, didn't they? It just ran out, so it was free
yeah.
then.
And then that the interesting part about that aspect of it was that Anna had a window, and that window was literally sort of, I think it was like September 17th for 8 weeks. And I also had a window because I was filming up until July, and then I was filming in the new year. And so I just said to Bex, is there any chance? And she said, actually, they're just coming up for renewal. And I said, well, if you're okay with me doing it, we're going to make it in September. And that was May, right, Bex?
Yeah, yeah. Also, with Anna's age as well, when Stephen first wanted to do it, and I was quite adamant that Anna was too young, because I'd written this part for a 39-year-old, and I think it was really important that she was at least 39. So I kept saying to Stevie, Anna's too young. I mean, I can't believe I had the gall to sort of to say that Anna Paquin might be wrong for anything, but I did say she's too young, and then she had turned 39 by the time we filmed it.
Yeah, she was 39 when we shot it.
Yeah, she was fantastic. I loved watching her, and I actually watched it the other night, just because I got the screener, and I was like, wow, this is a real treat. I hope our listeners will all go see it while it's in the theaters if you can. If not, it'll be on streaming. But taking your play from stage to screen, and because of the time compression you had with this short pre-production schedule and production schedule, did you kind of just go with it? Like, I mean, how much did it change from play to screen? Was there stuff that you could add that you couldn't do on stage that you were excited about, or were there other things that you felt were lost because you didn't have the intimacy of the theater kind of thing?
Well, I don't know. Am I allowed to say spoilers?
We can say there's spoilers. Yeah, go ahead.
So obviously the character of Neil isn't real. He is in fact, Yusuf, who plays Joseph, says that the film is like Mary Poppins with trauma. And in the play, I think it's very clear that he's not. It's much more clear in the play that he's an angel or whatever, a higher power, or I don't know, whatever you want to think of him as Mary Poppins, if you want to say that. And we didn't have. I want in the script for the film, I wanted it to be clear when at the end when we sort of come over Scarborough and reveal that Neil is not walking down the street. So that question is finally answered. Oh, he's not there. He's not real. He's but we couldn't afford that, could we, Stevie? We couldn't do that.
Well, we do the shot. We did. What was really interesting was we did this shot of. It was actually. I mean, we were really up against it. We shot the movie in 17 days, and that final day was the only day that we had Ray in Scarborough. and we had this shot of a drone outside the window in the cafe, and we did shoot panning away with the drone, not seeing him there, and only seeing Ray and Anna in the window. And for the first 3 or 4 cuts of the movie, that was the end of the film. But there was something about the way that Luca, who played Neil, did his exit, where he looks back at Anna and he looks back at Ray, that felt complete. That felt like, and of course, audiences will watch this and they will come away with what they want to feel.
Yeah.
For me, when he's at the door and he looks back, there is a completion in their relationship, and at that moment, finally, we're left with Ray and Anna, and they finally have a moment of intimacy, which they have not been able up until that point to allow each other to have, to connect in a way. And Neil is the hinge. Neil is the bridge that has given them the ability to be able to connect. So at that point, it felt like going out of the window was like us taking away from that intimacy. So I finally stayed inside the cafe with them, because it's all, Ray constantly throughout his name's Alan in the film, but Alan in the film constantly says, "Should we have a cup of tea? Should we have a cup of tea?" And he never gets to have his cup of tea. And finally they're there sitting, having their cup of tea. And on that final day, there was this, Ray had come up to me and said, "Would it be okay to improvise something? I've had an idea about something." And he improvised this really beautiful story, actually, about him and his wife, and about Ella and how she had come to be. And I remember you sitting next to me, Bex, going, "What's he doing? What's happening? Why is he speaking? There's no text here." And but I will just say that about Ray. He was so present for the film. He was so there for us, and he'd really thought about it. And again, another funny little interesting point is Ray's got 3 daughters, and his first daughter at the time of shooting was 39, and she's actually called like Ellie, but he calls her Elle, and he calls Anna's character Ella Elle all the way through. And so there was this kind of like, it was like he was talking about his daughter. It was really interesting, and again, I played with keeping it because it was really lovely. But ultimately, when the play finishes, when the film finishes, it finishes, and so you see Ray carrying on talking to her, but I bring the score up because they're finally connected again.
There was a lot more dialogue obviously in the play. There was a lot of dialogue. And there is quite a lot of dialogue in this film as well. And I see as much cinema as I can. And it is quite a shock sometimes to see a lot of dialogue on screen. And I kept saying to Stevie, we need to cut it. And he just so many times wouldn't let me cut it. Or just, said it's the sort of words that he kept saying to me, it's the words that I loved about it. I mean, there was a lot more talking in the play.
Yeah. When Rosh and I were discussing our questions for you guys, that was something she brought up, is that plays are very vocal, very, dialogue heavy, because you don't have a lot of places to go. You don't have a lot of movement you can do.
Yeah.
So we were wondering how that translated. And I felt that you had plenty of nice, quiet moments and reflections, and Anna especially. A lot of subtext, huge amounts of subtext was really well integrated into the story. So, nobody's saying what they really feel, but you understand exactly what's going on.
And she very she very pointedly does not answer a lot of the questions that are asked of her. And when she's challenged in the film in certain respects, she becomes defensive and then is quiet. And you see her thinking about what she has, you know, the character is full of guilt and is much harder upon herself than anyone else could be. So there is almost nothing that she could be accused of by any of the other characters that she hasn't already accused herself of.
I think she's more difficult I use the word difficult because I can't grasp access to another word. I don't necessarily see her as, it's more complex than difficult, but in the play she is definitely more Ella than she is in the film. I think too that she's more antagonistic, she's more self-sabotaging, and that is quite different. I mean, I still think she's like that in the film, and I still think it's really important to show that side of her character. But yeah, she was, that was even more so in the play.
Well, we discussed a lot, didn't we, Bex? The idea that that we don't see women in these positions of difficulty where they are struggling and are acerbic and difficult, and that we don't see women portrayed like that because, you know,
unlikable,
unlikable because it doesn't.
You always want the save the cat moment. You want to be
right.
Yeah, there's no save the cat here, really.
No, well, you know,
Neil becomes the cat, kind of, almost.
Neil is the cat.
Yeah, Neil's the cat.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of heavy lifting for him in that regard. You know, and also, obviously, I was going to say that from the play to the screenplay, we had without giving anything away, we had the ability to use water, which you know, was one of the things in the play that would have
been. I was so worried about how we were going to do that on stage.
Yeah, walking into the ocean is hard to do on stage. Yes.
Yeah.
We'd have made it work, Bex.
Ribbons, lots of blue ribbons.
Yeah. The character of Neil was fascinating, whether he was real or not. I mean, you could have left it open ended. It wouldn't have bothered me at all.
It kind of is open ended. I don't think we spoon feed it to you. I think it's up to you.
No, it's subtle. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you come up with that character, though? Was there a person in your life, Rebecca, that played that Neil part in your life? Was that kind of old soul in a young body kind of thing?
Well, it's, yeah, I mean, this might sound really deep, and I was going to avoid saying it, but for me, Neil represents, I have two sons who are now both 18 and 16, but and they were younger when I wrote it, but Neil to me represented the future of my boys sort of forgiving me, if that makes sense. So that's where I came up with the idea of Neil. It was like sort of the hope that the softness and the understanding and the sort of the clarity that he has would be something that I would, you know, having split with and lots of people split, you know, but how it affected me, I found it very difficult to be without my children half of the time, and so did their dad. That wasn't exclusive to myself, and I struggled with that. And so Neil was sort of an extension of forgiveness for me, which I hope that doesn't sound pretentious, but that is the truth.
Not at all. But I also remember, Bex, as well, you saying that during that period of time, you sort of almost wrote also somebody that you wished had sort of been there for you as well. Yeah. And which I always loved as an idea, that you created something that you know, this tiny element of hope sort of dragging you forward, you know, and I think that's really important, and I do find him really hopeful. And at the end, I find you know, that Ella is on an uptick. You know, the next day in the story, God, we're giving lots of spoilers here, but the next day in the story, she's due to be with her boys, with her girls for the first time. You know, and that's the next day, and he's got her ready and prepared to do that, even though
But also, he doesn't just help Ella; he helps all of
exactly.
them, and he's. I think people are sometimes confused because I think that's what's confusing about it is that you go, oh well, wait, she can see him, okay, so he's just her guardian angel or whatever. If you were to think that, and then when he starts talking to everyone within the unit, including Beth, he's there to help all of them because none of them can speak to each other. They just can't get through that barrier, and he is sort of the conduit. Is that the right word?
Yeah,
I
she's
just
the
Yeah.
kind of decipher, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's a better word. Yeah, definitely.
Wow, that's so beautiful. It's interesting you say that, Rebecca, because it just made me think of, like, in my own family, my parents divorced when I was in my 20s. And even though, like, we had seen it a long time coming, I remember my mom crying on the floor asking me and my sister for forgiveness for failing us. So I think that's a universal feeling that a lot of women have,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
don't touch on it
No.
in media, but it is something that we feel. So that's,
Well, I
yeah.
spoke to another mother recently, and she had been through the same thing with the split, and she said to me, "Did you find it difficult?" I said, "Oh yeah, so difficult to the sort of not having the children there and just being in the house for half of the week or whatever." And she said, "Oh, I didn't know it was okay to sort of say that." That and it's something that isn't spoken about. I don't
Hmm.
think very often. I think a couple of people thought I'd be like, "Well, hey," but it just wasn't. It just wasn't like that for me. Um, I didn't want to. I'm not saying there's never been a way hey moment, but I didn't. I just felt immediate, and that is how my brain is anyway. I just felt immediate guilt,
Hmm.
and like you said, shame, and just sort of almost like, and that's where Ella is. She doesn't want to enjoy her life, and she's actually refusing to, inverted commas, get better or to move on or to sort of yield. She's refusing to do that, and she's quite willfully knowing that she isn't changing, and that she is in some ways putting her foot down with her behavior. So
Yeah. Yeah, universal feelings, all. And speaking of universal feelings, I was curious about this. This might be a question more for Stephen, although, Rebecca, I wasn't sure from your biography if you'd worked. I know you're very in the UK scene, but I wasn't sure if you'd worked on anything in the US. I know for Stephen, you have. What are the differences you've seen between how the US and the UK approach storytelling?
Well, I think we'd have to sort of demarcate that into two separate boxes. There is the indie box, and then there's the sort of commercial box. And so when I think they're all very similar when there's a commercial aspect to it, because there has to be this sort of this gleeful outcome of the hero wins, the boy gets the girl, the mom is reunited with the son, or whatever it is, Home Alone, whatever. And and so the American, and I think the sort of idea of entertainment is that we go to the theater and we come out going, literally, wow, that was entertaining, right? It's and then you've got the sort of indie circuit where it's almost as if within the indie world, you're allowed to create drama that is thought provoking and dread word difficult. So I don't think that they are that dissimilar in that respect. But if you put a character on screen who is in a difficult situation, producers want to see resolution. Producers want to see how that character resolves and grows and learns from their mistakes or whatever, right? And so when you've got a story like ours, which is slightly open-ended, and you walk out of the cinema in a with a feeling of, well, it felt to me like she was on the upswing. That people can be terrified of that. Producers can be terrified of that, and yet it's such a massive representation of who we are. Cinema isn't just about coming out and kind of going, oh, I'm gonna jump into the weekend full of with a spring in my step.
It's an incremental change versus a giant change.
Yes, and I don't think that's that. I don't think that is that different. What I do sometimes find when I go back and watch, British drama is that it can be a much slower burn. It can take a lot longer for the protagonist to get there. It can also the protagonist, especially if like in television drama, might take a lot of episodes to finally reach their resolution. And it can often be more subtle. But that's not to say that I don't love, American dramas, because I absolutely do. I think often it's just a cultural difference, as opposed to a sort of difference in technique, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You guys are such a great team. I can tell how you guys work together really well. And I think this is going to do fantastic. But what can we look forward from you guys in the future? What are you guys working on now? Because you said you were working on something together.
We are working on something very different. We are doing it's a crime film. It's a thriller. People keep saying to me, why don't you direct your own stuff, and take your autonomy or whatever. But actually, one of my best friends always says to me, go where you're wanted. And Stephen was so brilliant to work with on A Bit of Light. He's so respectful and kind. And, we have similar brains for all sorts of reasons, be it sobriety or whatever. So we're doing...
She was really thinking about saying ADHD right then, but she didn't.
I do have ADHD.
As she was thinking about it, I was looking out the window at passers-by going, I wonder if she's going to... And also looking at my waving cat at the time, which might tell you something about myself.
I was going to say that, but I didn't. I do have ADHD. So we've been quite good on this for Stevie and I, because usually we talk in so many, they're not even circles. Like I wouldn't know I wouldn't know what shape they were, but I still haven't answered the question. Yeah, we're doing a thriller set in South.
That's cool. No, it's set where?
Set in South London.
South London. Wonderful.
What I wanted to do was I wanted Rebecca's sensibility. I wanted the characters that Rebecca writes with the realistic way that she goes about exploring character. But I wanted to set it in a world where it is an emotional crime thriller. So, for example, yes, there may be a speed chase, but this, high speed car chase, but actually it's going to take place in a 20 mile per hour zone.
That's awesome.
In suburban London. So it's kind of like, and we're writing it very specifically for somebody who I won't say right now, but he's doing really well. And we came up with the idea from scratch, and that's also been really fun, because we've really been sort of taking what we know about British crime thrillers, but also sort of infusing really, really powerful female characters within there, which is not something that you usually see in those stories. So yeah, that I think will probably happen at some point next year.
Wonderful.
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, mate.
Surprise.
Yeah, mate.
Guys need to communicate more. No, I'm just kidding.
And I am all about this female representation. So yay, can't wait to see it.
Rebecca, you actually played a small part in A Bit of Light. You were the waitress. Are you going to be in this other project with Bill?
Yes, I'm playing the lead. I haven't told you yet.
You just called me Bill, Tom.
I did. I called you Bill.
He did that so much yesterday.
I confused Roshni while we were talking about questions for this.
Bill?
I'm like, who's Bill? Like, oh, I'm thinking of Bill Compton. I did it again.
I've got my fangs sitting in my office right now.
Wonderful.
I'd be able to show you them if we were on Zoom.
Oh, man. We'll post that picture and not your official headshot.
There you go. That'll be great. Is this a vampire movie?
Yeah.
A Bit of Light is in selected theaters on April 5th and on digital and demand. Where else can people find you if they want to keep track of you guys? Are you on social anywhere?
Yes, I've got. I'm under Stephen Moyer on Instagram, and I'm on S Moyer on Smoyer on. I can't say X. I'm going to say
X.
Twitter. For as long as I can bear to stay, I am still. and yeah. There's a.
I'm not on any of the things.
Rebecca's a typical writer.
Well, I'm in my house playing Mario Kart. That's what I'm doing.
Oh, you're a gamer too. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Do follow Stephen and check out A Bit of Light in theaters or on your favorite streamer. Do follow us at writersgrouptherapy.com on Instagram and X, and writersgrouptherapy.com is our website where you can catch more interviews.